If you say the word futon to someone in Tokyo, they picture a thin cotton mattress folded neatly inside a closet, pulled out at night and put away by morning, part of a daily ritual that has been running in Japanese homes for centuries. If you say the same word to someone in Boston or Los Angeles, they picture a metal-framed sofa bed crammed into a college apartment, probably with a suspicious stain on the armrest and a frame that squeaks every time you sit down. Same word, completely different objects. And most people in the West have no idea that the thing they call a futon would be unrecognizable to anyone in Japan. But that would be strange enough on its own. Here is the part that almost nobody knows. The original futon was neither of those things. It was not a mattress. It was not a bed. It was not even something you slept on. Over 1,000 years ago in China, the futon was a small, round cushion that Buddhist monks sat on during meditation inside temples. It was woven from the soft fibers of the cattail plant, a wetland reed, and shaped into a circle to be placed on cold stone temple floors. The characters used to write it, pu and tuan, literally translate to cattail and round object. A cattail circle. That is what the word futon actually means. What nobody knew at the time was that this simple meditation cushion would lend its name to the bedding system of an entire civilization and then get completely reinvented by a furniture designer in Massachusetts who thought he could turn a Japanese sleeping mat into origami. The futon's real name was actually borrowed from the Chinese term putuan, and its connection to sleep? That came much later, once the word migrated to Japan and slowly attached itself to something completely unrelated to temples or prayer. Before that happened, though, Japanese people had to figure out how to sleep in the first place, and for most of their history, the answer was not very comfortable. During the Nara period, which lasted from 710 to 794, sleeping arrangements in Japan were split sharply along class lines. If you were a peasant, you slept on piles of straw, on mats woven from hemp, or sometimes just on the bare ground. In the northern regions, where winters could be brutal, people curled up naked inside piles of beaten straw to keep warm. That was the system. That was the bed. At the other end of the spectrum, Emperor Shomu had his own bed. It was a wooden platform with a tatami mat placed on top, imported from China during the 8th century. That bed still exists today, preserved at the Shoso Inn repository in the city of Nara. It is one of the oldest surviving beds in Japanese history, and it belonged to the most powerful man in the country. Everyone else got straw. The mats people slept on in this period were called mushiro. They were simple, thin, woven from rush grass, and they were not exactly built for comfort. But a single straw mat was better than nothing. And over time, people started layering multiple mats on top of each other to create something softer. That layering habit is how tatami flooring eventually developed, though the tatami of this era looked nothing like the finished, standardized panels used in Japanese homes today. By the time the Heian period began in 794, bedding had become an explicit marker of social rank. Aristocrats and court nobles slept on stacked tatami mats called yaedatami, and the number of layers you were allowed to stack was directly proportional to your position in the imperial court. The higher your rank, the thicker your sleeping surface. A low-ranking official might sleep on 2 or 3 layers. A senior courtier could pile up 8 or more. Your bed was literally a status symbol you could count. For the wealthiest nobles during this era, there was something even more elaborate, a large canopy structure called a chodai. It looked something like a 4-poster bed frame draped in silk curtains, and it served a double purpose. In the summer, the silk kept mosquitoes and other insects out. In the winter, it trapped body heat inside the enclosed space around the sleeper. Illustrations from this era show nobles lying on multiple tatami layers beneath these silk canopies, surrounded by painted screens and seasonal decorations. And there is an interesting detail about the bedroom itself during this period. The room where a noble slept was originally the most prestigious room in the house. It was decorated with fine paintings and ornamental objects. Because it was the best room, it gradually became the place where guests were received. The sleeping function moved elsewhere, but the room kept its status. That reception space eventually evolved into the tokonoma, the raised alcove you still see in traditional Japanese rooms today, where a scroll painting or flower arrangement is displayed. The tokonoma is roughly the size of a single tatami mat, and some historians believe it is a direct trace of the original tatami mat bed, elevated and preserved as a design element even after its sleeping purpose was long forgotten. But as tatami mats started being laid across entire room floors instead of just piled in one spot, the chodai canopy bed began to disappear. It simply took up too much space in the increasingly standardized Japanese interior. And that tension between comfort and space is something that would define Japanese sleeping culture for the next 1,000 years. The room had to serve more than one purpose. A dedicated bedroom, the way Europeans and Americans would come to understand it, was a luxury that most Japanese homes could never afford. The floor was where you sat, where you ate, and where you slept. Daily life happened close to the ground, and everything in the home was designed around that principle. Sleep had to be portable. Sleep had to fold up and go away in the morning. Now, during all of this, there was no cotton in any of these sleeping arrangements. People slept on straw. People slept under kimonos. The concept of pajamas did not exist yet. When you went to bed, you pulled your daytime clothes over yourself and hoped for the best. Cotton had actually arrived in Japan during the Heian period, but early attempts to grow it domestically failed. The climate wasn't cooperating, and imported cotton was expensive enough that most of it went to the wealthy and the military. For ordinary people, cotton was something they knew about but could not afford. Pay attention to this next detail, because it explains everything about how the futon actually came to exist. During the Sengoku period, the age of warring states that stretched from 1467 to 1615, cotton demand across Japan suddenly exploded. And the reason had nothing to do with clothing or bedding. It was war. Cotton was the key material used in the explosive fuses on bombs dropped from castle walls. It was used to make the slow-burning cord, called a hainawa, that ignited the matchlock rifles spreading across every battlefield in the country. It was used for military flags, banners, and soldiers' uniforms. Warlords across the fractured country were encouraging cotton cultivation in their territories. Commerce was booming along major highways like the Nakasendo, and cotton was one of the hottest commodities moving through the new trade routes. The civil wars that tore Japan apart for over a century turned cotton from a luxury textile into a strategic military resource that every regional lord wanted to control. When the fighting finally ended and the Edo period began in 1603 under the Tokugawa shogunate, all of that cotton production did not just shut down. The infrastructure was in place. The farms were producing. The supply chains existed. And now, without a war to absorb it, cotton started flowing into the civilian economy. This is the moment that created the futon as we know it. The early Edo period saw the development of the kaimaki futon, which is one of the strangest and most interesting pieces of bedding you have never heard of. The kaimaki was a padded, kimono-shaped blanket with actual sleeves attached to it. But the sleeves were not meant for your arms. They were designed to be laid flat along your sides to prevent the blanket from sliding off your body during the night and to trap your body heat inside the covering. It was, in a way, the original wearable blanket. Centuries before anyone on a late-night infomercial had the same idea. As for what people slept on underneath, the common version at the time was called a senbei futon. The name was a joke, and a pretty good one. Senbei are thin, flat Japanese rice crackers, the kind that snap cleanly when you bite into them. The mattress earned its nickname because it was about as thick and as padded as one of those crackers. A thin mat on the tatami floor, a kimono-shaped blanket on top, maybe a small pillow filled with buckwheat husks to keep the head cool. That was the entire sleeping setup for most people, even well into the Edo period. If you have ever eaten a rice cracker, you can imagine how comfortable sleeping on one would be. The timing of what happened next was almost too perfect. Cotton production kept expanding, and demand for warfare materials kept dropping. Farmers who had been growing cotton for the military now had customers in the civilian market. New cotton-related products started appearing across Japanese society. One of the most popular was the zabuton, a thick sitting cushion stuffed with cotton batting that made sitting in the formal seiza position far less painful. The zabuton became a bestseller, and the success of cotton cushions for sitting pushed manufacturers to start making thicker cotton mattresses for sleeping. By the mid-1700s, cotton was being cultivated widely across Japan. Distribution networks connected rural farms to urban markets, and suddenly, cotton textiles were affordable for ordinary townspeople. This is when thicker, properly padded cotton mattresses started appearing. The shikibuton, meaning spreading futon, and the kakibuton, meaning covering futon, became a matched set. A real mattress on the bottom, a real quilted comforter on top. For the first time, most Japanese people could sleep in genuine comfort. But even then, ownership was not universal. According to Yukio Machiyama of Nishikawa, Japan's largest futon producer, the modern-style futon with a padded mattress and quilted coverings first appeared among ordinary citizens through the yukaku, the licensed pleasure quarters, at the end of the Edo period. Rich merchants who visited these establishments experienced the comfort of properly made futons and brought the style home. The luxury trickled outward from there. Nishikawa itself was founded in 1566, making it one of the oldest companies in Japan. They did not start selling futons until 1887, which tells you something about how long cotton bedding took to become a mainstream commercial product. That is a company that existed for over 300 years before it sold a single futon. Even during the Meiji period, which began in 1868 and brought rapid westernization to Japan, cotton futons were only used by a handful of the wealthy. Commoners were still stuffing their comforters with burlap sacks, dried straw, and sometimes even shoji paper. The idea that a cotton-stuffed futon was a simple, everyday item is a modern invention. For most of Japanese history, it was anything but simple, and it was far from everyday. The cotton-stuffed futon as a true household standard did not fully arrive until the Taisho and Showa periods, deep into the 20th century. During those decades, it became common to buy your own raw cotton and hand-make futons at home. The post-war economic boom of the 1950s and 60s accelerated this further. As Japan's population flooded into cities and new apartment complexes called danchi were built across the country, living space became tighter than ever. The futon's ability to fold up and disappear during the day was not just a tradition anymore, it was a necessity. If you've been enjoying this video and learning something new, consider subscribing. I cover stories like this one every week, pulling apart the real history behind things we take for granted. By the early 1900s, the futon had settled into the role it still holds in Japanese culture today. Every night, you pull the shikibuton out of the oshiire, the dedicated closet with sliding doors built into the wall. You lay it out on the tatami floor. You place the kakibuton on top. In the morning, you fold everything up, store it back in the closet, and the room becomes a living room, a dining room, a workspace, whatever you need it to be. This was not a workaround for poverty. It was a design philosophy. Japanese homes were built with post and beam construction that left interiors open and flexible. Rooms were not labeled by function the way Western rooms are. A bedroom was not a bedroom all day. It was a room that became a bedroom at night and something else entirely in the morning. The futon made that transformation possible, and that daily ritual of putting the futon away came with its own set of practices. On dry, sunny days, futons were hung outside on balcony railings or draped over clotheslines to air out in direct sunlight. This was not optional. The sun-drying process naturally killed dust mites and bacteria, pulled moisture out of the cotton batting, and kept the futon from developing mold in Japan's humid climate. After airing, you beat the futon with a thin paddle called a futon tataki to knock out dust. During the rainy season, when outdoor drying was impossible, households used a futon kansuki, a machine that blows warm air into the bedding to dry it artificially. The oshiire closet itself tells you how central the futon was to Japanese domestic life. Oshiire literally means push inside. These closets were built with a pair of sliding doors called fuzuma, and the interior was divided by a horizontal shelf into an upper and lower section, specifically sized to hold folded futons, pillows, and seasonal bedding. A standard oshiire might be the width of 2 fusuma panels, roughly 180 centimeters across, just enough to hold a family's worth of folded cotton bedding stacked neatly. The oshiire only appeared gradually during the second half of the Edo period. Before that, people did not even have a dedicated place to store their bedding because for most of history, there was not enough bedding worth storing. Now, at the same time all of this was happening in Japan, the futon was completely unknown in the West. Americans and Europeans slept in raised bed frames with thick mattresses, box springs, and elaborate headboards. The idea of sleeping on a thin mat on the floor would have seemed absurd. That changed in the 1970s. Japanese immigrants had already introduced the concept of the futon to the United States decades earlier, but it was the counterculture movement and the back-to-nature wave that made it popular. Young Americans living out of Volkswagen buses and renting cheap studios discovered that Japanese-style floor mattresses were affordable, portable, and small enough to fit anywhere. You could roll one up, throw it in the back of a van, and have a bed in every new city you visited. The futon became the unofficial mattress of the nomadic lifestyle. In the beginning, we wanted everything all natural and pure, including what we slept on, said Randy Young, president of New Moon, a Boston futon manufacturer from that era. It was a niche product, mostly sold through small natural goods shops and cottage industry retailers. Nobody in the mainstream furniture world was paying attention to it yet. And then, in 1982, a furniture designer from Boston named William Brower had an idea that would change the futon forever. Brower had studied architecture at the Harvard Graduate School of Design. He was a skilled woodworker who had spent time in Japan and already slept on a futon mattress placed on a low platform bed of his own design. He knew that Japanese futons were flexible enough to be rolled up every morning, and one day he realized that if a futon could be rolled, it could also be folded. If it could be folded, you could hinge a frame beneath it in 3 sections. Fold the frame up, and you have a couch. Fold it down, and you have a bed. The same flexibility that made the futon perfect for Japanese closets made it perfect for Brower's trifold sofa bed. He built the first prototype in his woodshop on Montague Street, about 400 yards from the Bedworks furniture store that would become the first retailer to sell his invention. The American futon was born, and it looked almost nothing like the Japanese original. The Japanese shikibuton is 3 to 5 inches thick, made of cotton, and designed to lie flat on a tatami floor. The American futon mattress was 8 to 10 inches thick, often stuffed with foam and synthetic materials, and designed to sit on a slatted wooden or metal frame that converted between couch and bed positions. The Japanese futon is stored in a closet and aired in the sun. The American futon lives permanently in its frame, usually in a dorm room or a first apartment, accumulating years of use without ever being taken outside. They share a name, but they are fundamentally different objects. The word survived the crossing, but the philosophy behind it did not. In Japan, the futon is part of a daily ritual of transformation. You build your bed each night and dismantle it each morning. The room gets aired out, the cotton gets sunlight. The cycle of laying out and putting away is as much a part of the sleeping experience as sleep itself. In America, the futon became a permanent fixture, a piece of furniture that never moves, which is the exact opposite of why it was invented. And there is a health dimension to this that is only now getting serious attention in the West. The traditional Japanese approach of sleeping on a firm, low surface has potential benefits that modern sleep science is starting to document. A study published in the Lancet Medical Journal found that medium firm sleeping surfaces reduced back pain more effectively than very firm or very soft ones. The traditional shikibuton, placed on a tatami mat, falls squarely in that medium firm range. The tatami has a slight natural bounce to it, and the cotton mattress above it provides just enough cushioning without allowing the body to sink into unnatural curves. The firm surface keeps the spine closer to its natural alignment. There are no pressure points of the kind that develop on overly soft mattresses, where the heavier parts of the body sink in while the lighter parts are left unsupported. Blood circulation stays more even across the body. And because the sleeper is closer to the floor, where air is slightly cooler, the setup naturally stays more temperature neutral, which is a real advantage in a country where summer humidity can be punishing. This is not to say that sleeping on a futon is automatically better for everyone. The adjustment period for someone switching from a thick Western mattress to a 3-inch cotton pad on the floor can be rough. The first few nights, your hips and shoulders will likely feel sore, and your body will spend the first week learning how to distribute its own weight across a firmer surface. People with severe joint problems, arthritis, or limited mobility can struggle with the basic act of getting up and down from the floor every day. Side sleepers in particular may find the firmness uncomfortable because their shoulders and hips need more give than a traditional Buton provides. But the general principle that a firmer sleeping surface promotes better spinal alignment is well supported in orthopedic research. Some chiropractors and physical therapists now recommend that patients with mild to moderate back pain try firmer sleep surfaces before investing in expensive specialty mattresses. The Japanese figured this out centuries before anyone published a paper on it. They did not need a clinical trial to tell them that sleeping on something firm kept your back straight. They just knew, because they had been doing it for 1,000 years. Today, the futon remains a significant part of Japanese domestic life, even as Western-style beds have gained ground. A 2022 survey by Line Research found that 34% of Japanese people still use futons as their primary bedding, while 60% use beds. An earlier survey from 2016 by Dims Drive, with over 4,000 respondents, put the split even closer, at roughly 47% futons versus nearly 52% beds. For international travelers, the most vivid encounter with the futon usually happens at a traditional ryokan inn. The experience tends to catch first-time visitors completely off guard. You check into your room during the day and find an elegant tatami floored space with a low lacquered table, zabuton floor cushions, and a tokonoma alcove displaying a seasonal flower arrangement. There is no bed anywhere. You might open the closet looking for one and find nothing but a folded yukata robe and some extra towels. You go to the communal onsen hot spring. You eat an elaborate kaiseki dinner. You wander around the inn in your robe, and when you return to your room, the space has been completely transformed. Staff have entered while you were away, laid out a perfectly made futon on the tatami, turned down the kakebuton, and placed a small suite on the pillow. The living room is now a bedroom. By the next morning, the futon has vanished back into the oshiire, and the room is a living room again. The staff handle the entire transition. You do not need to fold or store anything yourself. That transformation is the entire point. The futon was never just a mattress. It was the mechanism that made Japanese interior architecture work. Without the futon, the multi-purpose room does not exist. Without the multi-purpose room, Japanese homes would need to be significantly larger. Without compact homes, the entire relationship between Japanese families, their living spaces, and their daily routines would look completely different. When you trace the full arc of this story, from a round cattail cushion in a Chinese Buddhist temple to a folding sofa bed in a college apartment in the American Midwest, what you are really watching is the same word being asked to carry completely different meanings by completely different cultures. The monks who named the Futon were thinking about stillness. The Japanese families who adopted the futon were thinking about flexibility. And the American designer who reinvented it was thinking about furniture. Each version solved a real problem for the culture that created it. The monks needed something to sit on during long hours of meditation. Japanese families needed a bed that could disappear. American apartment dwellers needed a couch that could double as a guest bed. But only the Japanese original was built around a philosophy of how a room should live and breathe across the full cycle of a single day. The morning ritual of folding your bed, airing the cotton in the sunlight, beating the dust out with a tataki paddle, and reclaiming the room for waking life. The evening ritual of pulling the bedding from the oshiire and laying it out again on the tatami, signaling that the work of the day is done and rest can begin. That daily rhythm is what survived 1,000 years. It is what still survives in 1/3 of Japanese homes today. And it is the part that never made the trip across the Pacific.